everyone, welcome back to my channel. I've decided that 2025 is going to be the year that I get back into my reading era, and that includes making videos on this channel for reading. It is officially January 1st, 2025, and if you're anything like me growing up, all January the only thing I was watching on YouTube were reading wrap-ups. So I thought I would try my hand at talking about the 20 books that I read last year. So let's go! The first book I read of the year is Lonely Castle in the Mirror, and you'll see later that the first book I read of the year and the last book I read of the year are both Japanese literature. And I went to Japan this year and I did a vlog on it. If you want to go and watch that, it's on my channel. But this is Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuku Sugimura, and it follows kind of this girl named Kokoro-chan, and something happened to her at school that kind of makes her a little fearful of going back. Basically being bullied. She has, social anxiety, and so she's not going to school. And while she's at home, her mirror starts shining and she steps through it to another world. And I believe there are 7 other children. No, so I think there's 7 in total, but there's a group of children who she kind of slowly finds out they are also not going to school, and there's a reason they're all not going to school. And so it's kind of a really cute story about, friendships and bonding and just kind of those mental health discussions, but a little not super in depth into that. But I will say, for the first 200 pages of this book, nothing really happened. It was more atmospheric rather than anything else. And I think it was originally ranked a lot lower in my ranking system, which, let me just also say, the way that I rank things is when I go into reading a book, everything starts at a 3-star read, and it has to either earn stars or lose them in my mind, and I just go purely off of vibes. It's not like I'm looking for anything specific to be like, oh, there that is, that's now a 4-star read. It's just pure vibes. But this was originally kind of ranked a lot lower just because it kind of dragged its feet in the first 200 pages. But then the last 70 pages were so good, made it so worth it. And I haven't met a lot of people that I could recommend this book to, but I'd love somebody who's read this to let me know. I also felt like I did not expect the direction it was going, like how all these kids were connected to one another, if that makes sense. I don't want to give any spoilers for it, but it was very cute, very good. I didn't expect the ending, and I thought it was very sweet. I know that there's a movie. I don't think it's recent. I think it's been out for a while, and it's like a cartoon, anime movie. And I really want to watch it, so that's on my list to watch. But that was the first book I read of the year. Alright, the next book I read was 5 Survive by Holly Jackson, and I gave this one a 4.25 stars. I read it a really long time ago, so I'm going to try to describe what happens, but basically it's 6 people in a camper, and they're all trying to go meet. I think they're on spring break. It's a little toss up in the air. I didn't really understand how old really all of them were. I think they're kind of around early college age. Anyways, but they're taking this camper to go meet with some other friends on spring break. And they get a flat tire, they get trapped in a very secluded area, and a sniper shows up and starts threatening them. And it's not a random attack, it's on purpose, and you learn why. It was kind of an up and down for me, where there were a few plot twists there was multiple plot twists in the story, and a few that I was like, oh duh, I guess that, coming from a mile away. But then there was one at the end that I didn't expect, and I just remember, again, this is kind of one of those that the ending really turned it around for me, and I was like, oh, okay. And I don't know if this is a spoiler, so maybe if you've never read this book and you, close your ears for a little bit, go to the next one, the next book I'm gonna review. But I didn't hate the weird romance, subplot line. I didn't hate it. I actually, because at the very end, there's a letter, right? And I don't know if there's gonna be a second book to this series. I really don't think there is, but I would love to read one. And the thing with Holly Jackson is, I'm kind of like, I also want to tell you guys if I recommend these or not. I want to say yes, because ultimately I did enjoy this story, and I know Holly Jackson's like a really great like thriller writer, and I definitely want to give her more of a chance, but I think there was some things that like some of the writing kind of like irked me a little bit, and then one of the characters I felt was really useless, and I think he was only there because the Five Survive title sounded really catchy. And then again, there were the plot twists that I kept guessing, but you know, maybe that was the point, that like you guess a few of them and the one at the end really like turns it around. But overall, I enjoyed it. Over 4 stars, I got 4.25. But yeah, that was the second book I read. Let's talk about the third book that I read. Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I give this a 4.75 stars. I was gonna give it a 5 stars, but I'll kind of get to that, the reason why I didn't later. I was a teenager and preteen in the peak Wattpad and Tumblr era. I know, very lucky of me, very historic to have lived through. And I'll say it right now, I was a werewolf Wattpad girl. That is my truth, and that is what I'm sticking with. And this just scratched an itch that was so needed for me. Like, if you're in a reading slump, you need to read this. And you love Ali Hazelwood, okay? I'm not saying this is one of the like best pieces of literature in the world, obviously. Look at it. There's werewolves on the cover. It was just so fun. So I love like also the trope where it's like, you know, angry, brooding man is soft for his little sister or soft for his daughter, you know? And it was just so good. But I think Misery, also that is the main character's name, the way that Ali Hazelwood writes is she's quite obviously like has that millennial humor, and all of her female love interests have, I'd call them all a little joogy, I'll be really honest with you. And I'm actually currently reading Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. It's my 4th book of hers, and they all have that little specific formula where they have a little bit chuggy, but I can forgive it, right? Because it's just such a fun time, such an easy read. I think I read this in like 2 sittings, and the only reason I stopped the first time is because it was like 2 in the morning and I had to be up early, right? But it was very good. I do recommend it. Here's the part where I say why it was not a 5-star read, and this is a spoiler, so skip again to the next one if you don't want to hear this. But one of my least favorite tropes, and I find it a lot, and I think it might have happened in another Ali Hazelwood book, is that really commonly it's like the 2 characters finally get together, they finally have sex, and then the male lead like turns on her and he like pushes her away to protect her, right, from danger or from getting her feelings hurt. But then it just feels so much like she was used, and obviously that's what like she feels too. And I just think that's so yucky for like male main characters to do. And I don't even think it's just been in this book. I think I've actually read it in like multiple other books. And to be honest, that was a very common trope on the Wattpad days. So maybe Miss Hazelwood was just taking inspiration from them. But I genuinely think that this would have been a 5-star read had that not happened. But I will be reading this again. Miss Hazelwood, please. I know you said you were only gonna give us 1, but please. Alright, the next book I read was Love, Loss, and What I Wore by Nora Ephron and Delia Ephron. This was just, I can't even really say what it was about. It's basically this woman kind of recounting, she has picked like drawings of these clothes that she had when she was a child and kind of telling the story, a little mini snippet of her life, like when she wore that outfit or what that outfit kind of reminded her of. It was fine. Like I said, I always give books a straight 3 stars, and then they have to either impress or disappoint me. And this was just very meh. It felt like a coffee table book. I did read it on Kindle. Any book you don't see I physically have. Obviously I read it on Kindle, and I just felt I was promised something on social media. I don't even remember the video because that's where I get all my recommendations, like TikTok, Instagram, sometimes from friends, but that's in YouTube as well. That's mainly where I get these things from. But I just felt I was like, I can't remember why it was recommended, but I would not recommend it again. So that was Love, Loss, and What I Wore. On to number 5, the 5th book that I read this year, and my first 5-star read is Fantastic Land by Mike Bachman. I think that's how you say that. So good. It's very Lord of the Flies. It's also a commentary on the age of social media and accountability. If you ever like loved like Disney horror, if you know the very specific genre of like YouTube videos that I'm talking about, you would like this. This, I remember, was so good, but it also just like unsettles you in a way that it's like, you know, I don't know how to describe it, like just like the human condition and what people do under pressure. And there are just parts of this that I think about, not daily, but I will just randomly be sitting there and remember, like, if you've read this before, remember the warthogs, and I'm just like, geez, what the hell was up with them? Like, oh my god, it was so good, but it made me so like viscerally uncomfortable at some points that I don't think I'll ever read it again, but I have recommended this to so many people, and it's written really fun, where it's written in like interviews. So like this one, like it tells you who they are. So it's basically what it's about is it is about a theme park in Florida called Fantastic Land, and it's very reminiscent of Disney, though Disney does exist in this universe, because the appeal of this Fantastic Land, of this theme park, Fantastic Land, is that it's built kind of on the coast. So, you know, there's more to offer. Meanwhile, like Disney's built more inland, I think, and that's like because of the hurricanes. And guess what? Hurricane happens, but don't worry. They have a plan where there's a few hundred hotel theme park employees that signed up to stay in the instance of a hurricane, and their entire job is to protect it from looters, follow the plan that's set in place, because they have food, water, they have all the supplies they need to survive for months. And because of that, the Coast Guard does not save these people for months. They think, this is not a spoiler, this is from the very beginning, they're like, we assumed that they would be fine because there was a perfect plan in place, food for months, and shit hits the fan on day 1. And I said it was like Lord of the Flies. They start building factions, they start turning against each other, people die, obviously, and it just gets so gory, and it, like I said, it's a lot, and there's a lot going on, but it's so cool the way that it's told from like different sides, because it's like every person is an unreliable narrator. Just stuff goes absolutely crazy. And like I said, this sticks with me, but I don't know if I will ever reread it. I have this copy so I can lend it out to people, and I really want to hear other people's opinions about it. But that was Fantastic Land. The 6th book that I read this year was Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. I gave it a 4.75 stars. And the only reason it did not get a 5 stars is because my little pea brain kept getting very confused, and I had to keep going back and rereading things, and that's on me. That is on me, guys. Whatever. Also, fun fact, so when I went to Barnes & Noble to find this, I walked around for 20 minutes, specifically just looking for this book, looking in the W's, because I'm an idiot, and I wasn't gonna ask anyone for help. I just like really, I went back on my phone to be like, why can I not find this? Like looking it up on Barnes & Noble's website to remember, Emily Wilde is not the author of this book. She does not exist. So basically it's about this kind of academic, I don't think she's a professor, but she is this, I think she is a professor actually. She's a fairy researcher. She goes to some Nordic country that the town I cannot pronounce the name of. I tried, but she's going because she is writing the first ever encyclopedia of fairies, and very specifically this town has some very specific ones she wants to study. And so she goes there, she makes an immediate enemy out of all of the townspeople accidentally, just because she's very one-track mind, like, I don't need the help or kindness of others, I'm gonna do what I want to do. Doesn't realize that she needs the help of the townspeople to kind of learn more about their fairies and their history. And then her academic rival, Wendell, who she's like, why can nobody else tell that that man is a fairy, shows up, and he charms the townspeople and just generally makes her life a hell of a lot harder. And it is so good. If you love a sopping wet, pathetic male love interest, this is a story for you. Like I said, so much happens, and it's written journal style, and it's very funny. I don't know if this is a spoiler, maybe it is, skip ahead. My favorite chapter is when Wendell takes the journal and he writes his journal entry, and he is just the funniest person ever. It is so good. Yes, I recommend this to people, and I cannot wait to read the rest of her books. The next book that I read was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I think that's how you say his last name. I gave it a 3.75 stars. And so basically it's about this girl who, you know, everything's going wrong in her life, and her cat dies, and then she's kind of like, I'm done with this, right? And she ends up waking up in a library where an old librarian from when she was a little girl kind of walks her through and is like, all of these books are anything you could have been in life. They are all the different paths that you could have taken and who you could have become. So here, take a book, and when you read the book, you end up transported to that timeline. It's a very rough kind of description of what happens. And so it's basically this girl kind of going in these different situations and seeing how, you know, like, this is one dream I had, but oh no, it's not perfect, let's go somewhere else. And just no matter where she goes, she's just not happy. And, you know, very introspective. I will say I can't really say I recommend this to people, purely because I felt like it was a little too heavy-handed, and I think that's my own fault for going in after it has been recommended like thousands of times to me on social media and expecting it to change my life, you know, like expecting it to be one of the best things I've ever read. I think I had just too high hopes for it. I will say the first 75% didn't do it for me. I was kind of more like annoyed, like, but the last 25% I thought was pretty good. But it is just that thing where I think I went in with too high of expectations. It didn't live up to it, and I can't really be mad at the book or the writer for that. And I know so many people love it, and that's your truth, man. I just wasn't for me. Okay. Alright, the next books I'm lumping in together because they are a duology, and that is Six Crimson Cranes and The Dragon's Promise by Elizabeth Lim. Okay? And I gave this one a 4 stars and this one a 3.75 stars. Okay, this may be an unpopular opinion, but again, it is my truth. I think duologies are a lot of times, this is my opinion before the beginning of the year, I think that a lot of times trilogies are not needed. They're too long. I think after, this is my little soapbox, after the surgence of trilogies with The Hunger Games, Divergent, when all that really started picking up and everyone and their mothers wanted to write a trilogy, everyone went into writing something with the intention of making it a trilogy, which just caused them to drag things out and put in a lot of unnecessary plot points that were not necessary. And that's why I am a trilogy hater. You will see how this thought has been challenged, where I was really excited that I'd found a fantasy series that was just a duology, but I now think that my final thoughts on this series, while I vaguely enjoyed it, was that it needed to be a trilogy. This book was just, let me start from the beginning, okay? So basically we have our main character, Shiori, who she is the youngest daughter of the emperor. She has 6 older brothers, and she is the only girl. She is the 7th child, and she has a stepmother who she used to be very close to when she was younger, but she did something that angered her stepmother, and now they kind of hate each other. And basically she's trying to prove, at the very beginning, she's trying to show her father, like, this woman is evil, this is an evil stepmother situation. And because of that, she is cursed, where her brothers, every time it is nighttime, I believe, they have to, daytime, they turn into 6 crimson cranes, and the stepmother gets a bowl, pops it on Shiori's head, and is like, nobody's gonna recognize you, you can't speak, and you can't tell anybody that you are Shiori, right? So basically it is her journey to try to save her brothers and save the kingdom, right, from this evil stepmother. So I thought that the beginning 2/3 was very slow moving. Could have really been picked up. I think the reason it was so slow is because she was trying to, there is kind of a little bit of a love triangle situation here, but I think she was trying to build up the relationship between Shiori and her love interest, spoiler I guess, Takan. And the thing is, like I said, she has this bowl on her head. She can't speak. People think she's just like this peasant demon, right? They think she's freaky because nobody can get the bowl off of her head because it's a curse. And she, like, canonically just smells like fish all the time because they make her sleep in the basement that stores all the fish. And my issue, let me read what I wrote down. Kind of a spoiler, I guess, but you know that her fiance is her love interest. But am I really supposed to believe that Takan, who, you know, he's like the son of a duke, he falls in love with a girl who thinks is probably a demon, has a bowl on her head, and canonically smells like fish? Unrealistic, but I respect it, you know? Yeah, and then I felt this one had so much more action, I think in a way to make up for the first book, but just went way too fast, and there was I kept getting confused. Like, there's a character that shows up that I'm like, who are you? Where did you come from? No, actually that was in this one. I was like, who are you? And they're like, oh, of course, it's the person from the first chapter. I'm like, what? What's going on? And I did like, this one had more of like like more of the fantasy part of it, because she's like underwater in the dragon realm for this. It's very fun. I actually really liked, like, hashtag justice for Seiryu. He was my favorite. I think that's how you say his name. But I did really, really like the ending. I will say that. But I think this is an instance where a trilogy could have saved it. This was the next book that I read. It is A Certain Hunger by Chelsea G. Summers. I gave it a 4 stars, and the way that I would describe this, basically it is this food writer who she is writing a memoir from jail because she has killed and eaten a few men, finally got caught for it, and she's just like, yeah, I did it. I'm a sociopath, here's how, right? And is it sociopath or psychopath? I'll confirm that. I don't want to say anything incorrect. But she's like, yeah, I did it. Deal with it. Here are my thoughts. And so it's really fun because it's like if Samantha Jones from Sex and the City was a food writer. So there were very fun parts, and she, you know, obviously unreliable narrator. If that's your jam, this was very good. But I will say something that I find an issue. I think I would consider this literary fiction. I do try to intersperse like my fun reads with kind of something more serious or, you know, more introspective. I do find issue with a lot of recent stuff that I've read where they use sexuality for a shock factor, or like, you know, because I do think in a way that gore and eroticism intersect, like they're a Venn diagram, and I know that's kind of a weird thing to say, but is too much for me sometimes, and I don't know if I don't like it and it annoyed me because I personally don't like it, or if it is just too heavy-handed nowadays. But another one I can think of is like, you know, Boy Parts by Elisa something. Like, I just felt like women can be crazy without being sex crazed. Like, if that's an okay way to say it, that might make people mad, because then on the other hand, like, why should women not talk about their sexuality? You know, like, two sides of the coin. But it's just something I'm not really personally a fan of. So, you know, be mad at me in the comments for saying that if you want, or, you know, tell me what your thoughts are on that. I'd love to hear them, actually. It's a really interesting discussion that I haven't had with a lot of people in my real day-to-day life, because I don't really read the same type of books as a lot of my friends, so. All right, the next book that I read was Like Me by Haley Phelan, and it's about this girl named Mickey who she lives in New York City, and she really kind of wants to be an influencer, but it's because she's obsessed with this influencer who kind of looks like her and has what she would say is the perfect life. And one day this girl goes missing, and she tries to figure out what happens to her, but people are calling her crazy because they're like, we don't know who you're talking about. And also, like, she kind of interacts with people from that influencer's world who kind of like adopt her, and she gets her big break in the modeling industry and basically descends into madness, right? So thriller, that I was kind of really excited for the premise. Normally I rent my books on Kindle, and I do have Kindle Unlimited, but I bought this one and I was a little disappointed that I had bought it, but it wasn't on any library to rent. But I just felt like for a thriller, it didn't really grip me, and, you know, kind of common theme with the unreliable narrators is mostly just like actually this isn't really unreliable, maybe it is. At some point she becomes unreliable, right? But she's just very unlikable, and there's a blackface moment in here, which is literally the whole point. That's like her downfall, but it's just a lot, but also not very interesting. But I didn't like hate it, like I didn't give it 1 or 2 stars. It was just very neutral for me. But I will say I was just really confused by the ending. So if anyone's read this and can explain to me what happened, maybe, you know what, part of me also thinks that these stories that I've had lower stars because I got confused, that's just like user error. Like, that's a me thing. So I do kind of wonder that I should maybe give some things another try now that I've already had one go of them. So maybe this will be one that I try to read again, because like I said, the ending was confusing to me. So yeah, don't know if I'd necessarily recommend Like Me. So the next book I read was My Body by Emily Ratajkowski. I think that's how you say her name, I'm unsure. But a rule I have for myself is every year I have to read one nonfiction book. And I like this, that it was more like a series of essays and not just a standard celebrity memoir. I'm not like a huge fan of celebrity memoirs. I do really want to read I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. I do really want to read that one, but I feel like some are just a little too self-indulgent for me. But this, I would recommend this to girls that are in their late teens, girls in their early 20s. It was just, not all the essays did it for me, and I can't really describe why I liked them so much, but I felt she was very down to earth. And, you know, the stuff about her husband that she writes, and now they're divorced, and seeing, like, I can't really describe it, but I'm very excited to see what else she puts out, because now I follow this woman on Instagram and I get to watch her with her cute little son, and she recently posted that she wrote something recently that she was proud of, and I will be purchasing it. It's just really funny because I had this on my TBR for so long. I found it on a discount bookshelf at one of my local bookstore, and I had it for so long before reading it, and it was very good. I gave it a 4.75 stars. Alright guys, so the next 2 books that I read, I have to admit I wasn't going to include them at first, but then I had already said, here are the 20 books that I read this year, and I realized if I didn't say them, like I made a TikTok or like a reel, I guess, now that TikTok's getting booted, kind of similar to kind of saying if I would recommend these, yes or no. And I realized I omitted these two on accident, and I think it was for the best because they are The Fae King's Curse by Jamie Schlosser and Mated to the Monster by Sarah Spade. And listen, if monster effing is your thing, go for it. I enjoy it from time to time. I do dabble. But they're just straight up filthy. And it's like, there's nothing that gets me out of a reading slump like a book like this. And okay, so I don't want to spend too much time on them. And it's so funny because there's so many of these books. But, so The Fae King's Curse. I gave it 3.5 stars. Alright, I'm going to read you guys what I said, like how I reviewed it. I said, would I ever recommend this book to someone? No. Was it the best fantasy romance I've ever read in my life? Also no. But was it exactly the Wattpad revival I needed? Absolutely. This, if you sent me back to 2012, 2013, 2014, handed me an iPad, because I used to read Wattpad on my iPad, handed me an iPad with this story loaded onto it, I would have thought it was the peak of fiction. I would have eaten it up. And you know what? I did eat it up. It was a little weird because, let me just give a very brief overview. Basically, there is this girl who I feel bad because I cannot remember her name. I should remember her name. Good. Doesn't say her name because it's told in first person. I know the guy's name is Kieran. Basically, this girl is kind of misunderstood at school. She lives in these woods, and every day she goes and like meets this boy in the woods because that's her only friend, right? She meets him every single day, but every day for her that passes is a year for him. So they meet when they're around the same age. And he's also blind because of a curse that was put on him, right? And so she keeps coming back, right? There's some times where she can't go, and it's like this whole thing where she never realizes that he's only allowed to cross the plains once a year on his birthday, and he always uses it just to come see her. And then, this is at the very beginning, she realizes, like, I need to go to college, I need to move on from... lots of notifications, but she's like, I need to kind of move on, I need to meet new people, I can't keep holding on to like this random man I'm meeting. I think she finds out really early that he's like a fairy because he's aging so quickly. And he's like, no, you're mine. But his curse is basically that he's blind and he will only be able to see again if he sleeps with his soulmate. And it wasn't as bad as you'd think it would be, but I just remember, again, just vibes. Again, when I recommend it, no. So that's probably why I didn't even think about saying that in my TikTok I made. Oh my god, okay. And then the next one is Mated to the Monster by Sarah Spade. It's about this girl who she finds a spell book in a random like used bookstore, takes it home and is like, oh yeah, it's a really good idea, I think, to try one of the spells from here. Let's just go for it. Draws like a pentagram like with chalk in her apartment, accidentally summons a demon, and the demon's like, I'm in love with you, you're mine. And she's like, no you're not, you can't get out of that thing. And she tries to basically reverse it, but also of course falls in love with the demon man. Both of these two books just straight up smut. Fun time, but straight up smut. The review I gave it was I gave it a 3.75, so I think a little higher than the last book I read, but I can't in good conscience give this book higher than a 3.75, but the writing was pretty enjoyable and an easy read I needed in between reading an emotional thriller. Oh, I was also reading, side note, I was reading Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. I think that's the name of the author. So I'd started that book. It's so heavy. That's when I read this. You know what? This is Karen Slaughter's fault because it was so emotionally heavy. I decided I was like 30% of the way in. I was like, I need to read something light. I read The Fae King's Curse, and then I went back, read 20 more percent. I was like, I need a break, and so I read Made It to the Monster. So this is that woman's fault, but they were a good palate cleanser, I will say that. So I just needed to read this in between the emotional thriller. I said wouldn't really recommend unless you're just looking for something quick and fun. If you like monster effort romances, you know. And if that's your jam, that's your jam. Just own it. 15th book I read was Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones. I think that's how you say her name. Plug again, I finished reading this at the Starfield Library in South Korea while I was waiting for my friends who were getting their hair done. And I also made a vlog about that if you want to go watch that. Please do. Leave a like and a comment. But I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 4 stars. You know, it wasn't the best thing I'd ever written. Again, there were parts where I was like, what is happening? What's going on? Let me backtrack like 10% and then reread it to see like if I had missed something, just reread something, if I just read something wrong or I missed something. It was enjoyable. If you are a die-hard fan of the movie, don't read the book. It's a different story. I was debating whether or not, I have to admit, you guys, I think I will eventually see it, but I really was like kind of riding a high on this book and we were about to fly back, so I almost downloaded the movie to watch on the way back, but people were saying it just wasn't the same. Again, you'll find my favorite genre of men are the sopping wet and pathetic, and that is how I would describe Howl. I just... I love the banter between them, but it's just so funny to imagine this entire time she's the old crotchety woman from the movie The Howl's Moving Castle as he's like in love with her. And the ending, I will say the ending, like last chapter, like was instantly like, let's get married. And I was like, huh? Can we do a little bit more? Can we build a little bit? Like I knew they were gonna end together because I know the basics of Howl's Moving Castle, but I was like, I wanted a little more, so I couldn't have given it more than a 4 stars. But again, if you're not a diehard fan of the movie or you're okay with something that's a little different from the story, go ahead and read it. It was good. The most insane reading thing to come out of 2024 for me is that books 16, 17, and 18 that I read were a 5-star run, and that was the Villains and Virtues series by A.K. Kagino? I don't know, girl. So sorry I can't pronounce your name right, but I am forever indebted to you. This book, Thrown in the Dark, is the first one, Summoned to the Wilds is the second one, and Eclipse of the Crown is the third one. There are 2 other books that are in the same world but not expanding on the series, but anyways, it's really telling me to calm down. But these books are so good. I read them all on Kindle Unlimited. And then for my birthday, a friend bought me the first one. Shout out Cece. And someone gave me an Amazon gift card. And I'm going to use it to buy the other 2 books. So good. I know, okay, the cover's a little funny. And I've been recommending it. I have 2 patients. I'm a physical therapist and all I do at work is yap, yap, yap. And I have 2 patients who are also pretty big readers. And I have recommended both of them. I've threatened them. I'm like, you have to read this book. And so I'm like short-circuiting with how much I love it. Basically, the premise is this is Amma, and that's Damien. Damien is a half human, half demon spawn, whose whose life's work is trying to get his dad out of a crystal he's been trapped in by the current king, because the current king was like, I'm gonna do away with all the evil, all the demons, traps his dad in a crystal. So he has just spent years and years and years of his life creating this talisman that he's going to put into the king, which whenever he says a certain word, the king does anything that he will ask of him, and he's gonna free his dad, right? This is Alma. You don't know her deal until pretty much the end of the book. But on first chapter, she runs into Damien. He has something in his pocket that she needs. She reaches in. What does she do? She grabs the talisman. It is now inside of her. And this man right here says, okay, well, the only way to get that talisman out of you is to kill you. But you're so good and pure that I can't detect that dark talisman in you, so you're coming with me. You're coming with me along this villain's journey, and at the end of it, I'm gonna kill ya. And I've been describing it as a dark fantasy rom-com. Very villain gets the girl, very slow burn, but it's all so worth it. In the end, like, it just feels very realistic for me, and this was kind of, you can kind of tell from like me reading The Six Crimson Cranes and now this, that I'm trying to dip my toes back into the fantasy world, because that's all I really read when I was younger. I've moved on to other things, but I really want to get back into it, and this, so good. I get kind of scared to recommend this to people because I'm afraid they won't love it as much as I do, but I will say out of all of them, this is also probably an unpopular opinion about trilogies, is I always think that the second book is the best, and I typically usually feel like the third one's unnecessary, but this one was very necessary. But if I'm ranking it, I would say my favorite book is book 2, Summoned to the Wilds, then this is my second favorite, and then the third, Eclipse of the Crown, is my least favorite. Still give them all 5 stars. I will say though that my biggest issue is that I zoomed through the third book, and actually the next video I'm gonna post is kind of a 24-hour reading, I don't want to say challenge, but more experiment, where you can see my real-time reactions to reading the second and the third book. And I think I was just so, I wanted to get to the end, I wanted to get to the happy ending, I wanted to know what happened, that I was just reading through it way too quickly. So it is on the agenda to reread this series at some point. But there's like a part in the third book that I was rolling around in my room, like running around, jumping wall to wall, rolling on the bed, like screaming, because I was like, oh my god. And if anyone's read it, literally it was just the line, you. And you'll know what that means, but it was so good. Ah! So please go read this. Or if anyone has read this, please tell me what you thought of it. And if you hated it, keep it to yourself. Keep it to yourself. Keep it to yourself. I will hear criticisms, but if it was like your worst book of the year, don't tell me. Don't tell me that. I can't handle it. I can't handle that. But yes, that was 16, 17, and 18. All right, we are on the home stretch of the books that I've read this year now, and the 19th was The Prophet by Khalil Gibran, and I was very neutral about this book. I was a 3-star, so definitely a downer since how I liked 16, 17, and 18, but it wasn't for me. I know it wasn't meant for me. I don't like poetry. I'm not philosophical. I think it was, again, promised to be a book that kind of changed my life or changed my perspective of the world. There were good quotes from it. Didn't do a ton for me, right? I thought, you know, like I've used this to describe a few of the other books I've read, that it was very heavy-handed and on the nose. But then, you know, I have to kind of take a step back and realize that maybe those are my opinions, and I already shared the opinions with this author, but maybe there are other people who don't share those same opinions, and that it would really make them think, it would really change their perspective. So I just think it wasn't really meant for me as a person. It only took me an hour to read, so it's not like it was like a loss in my life that I didn't like it, and I don't regret reading it. And there's some people in my life that I know, like my younger brother, I might recommend to read this book. Not saying that he doesn't have the same morals as me, but he, I think, is a little more philosophical and might enjoy that a little bit more, right? So yeah, not super special, right? But we will end this video on a high note with book 20 of the year, and that was The Graveyard Apartment by Mariko Koike. So this was the second Japanese author, Japanese literature that I read, and I gave it a 4 stars, which now I'm wondering if I might rate it a little higher now that it sat with me for a little bit. I finished it a few days ago. But it is Japanese horror doing what Japanese horror does best, and that is putting me on edge in the broad daylight. It was, like I said, I went to Japan, and I went in October, so when it was still hot and muggy, and it just kind of transported me back, so I felt like I could see myself kind of where these characters were. I will say that there were a lot of, well, let me say what it's about. So basically, it is about this family. It is a mom, a dad, and a daughter, and they move into a fancy 8th-floor apartment where it all seems too good to be true. It's on kind of the outskirts of Tokyo. It's really close to a preschool that the little girl's gonna go to. It's very cheap. They've spent all their savings into buying this place, and the only downside is that it is surrounded on all sides by a graveyard, and there's a Buddhist temple, and from their balcony they can see the crematorium, which is constantly having black smoke coming out because they are cremating bodies. And also, to make matters worse, I kind of gathered that nowadays mostly everyone in Japan is cremated, I think. But this very specific graveyard was around in the time when they still buried bodies. So everyone's a little on edge. They think it's a little creepy, but they're like, we're gonna make the best of it because this is the perfect place for us. And then things start going wrong, and unexplained things start happening, and it's one of those, the thing about a lot of Japanese horror, I feel like, is you never physically see the ghost. It's like voices, things happening, brushes with cool air coming in, and smells, and it's not like a physical entity, or an entity, I guess ghost is not physical. It's not like an entity that you see. It just does really well with not needing the visual shock factor to make it scary, right? Something that, I guess a reason why I probably didn't give it 5 stars. Oh, and another thing is that the family, the mom and the dad, are also kind of already being haunted by something that they both did in their past, and the repercussions of that, which is mentioned throughout the book. But why I think I didn't give it higher than a 4 stars is that there were a lot of loose ends that were not tied up, and especially that specific plot line. I would have loved to see a little bit more about it, but it wasn't. But I will say, my roommates are gone for New Year's, and so the past few days I've been alone in the apartment. Thank God they're coming back tomorrow, because I was laying in bed and I heard a creak. I live in an old house, things are gonna creak, and I instantly just started thinking about the ending of the book, and I got so freaked out, so skeezed out. I couldn't go to the bathroom, and the bathroom is literally 5 steps away from my room, and I was like, I can't, I'm too scared, might as well wet the bed. I didn't actually think that, but I was so scared. And it's one of those things that literally I will think about it in the daylight, because I'm chit-chatting right now, it's not scaring me, but I'll just be sitting there and I'll be like, oh, that was really freaky, but it was really good. So yes, I do recommend this book to people. I actually think this is you know how some people save spooky books for October, I think this would be a really good summertime spooky read. You know, this is not one that I would recommend saving for Halloween. I would read it earlier. You know, if you're a mood reader and that speaks to you. But yes, thank you for watching my 2024 reading wrap up. I actually had a lot of fun chatting about my books, and I was really surprised with how many of the books that I actually read that were, I'm dropping them, that were physical copies. Normally, I've been really on my Libby grind. I just dropped another book, so I can't show you that. But I've been on my Libby and Kindle Unlimited grind, so it's been really nice to actually read the books that I have in my current library, and I'm going to try to keep, you know, working on those in 2025. But thanks for watching. Like I said, I want to do a lot more kind of reading, writing, lifestyle stuff. So if you like that, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.